Elliot Raymond had built an empire brick by brick, deal by deal, until London itself seemed to bow at the mention of his name. Raymond Global Properties owned half the skyline, shimmering towers of glass and steel that rose like monuments to his ambition. Interviews, awards, charity galas, government dinners, he had lived the life most men only fantasized about. But every night, when the city lights dimmed and the noise of power faded, he returned to the one thing money could not solve, his son, Theo. 14-year-old Theo Raymond was born on a stormy winter morning, when thunder rattled the hospital windows and hail struck the pavement like thrown stones. Elliot remembered the moment vividly, the doctor's face, pale under the fluorescent lights, the words, severe spastic cerebral palsy, and the sudden silence in the room. Not the silence of peace. The silence of dreams collapsing before they even had a chance to breathe. Theo's body had fought him from the start. His legs stiffened without warning. His hands trembled like leaves caught in a wind only he could feel. His muscles resisted commands, turning simple movements into exhausting battles. Speaking took time. Eating required patience. Walking was impossible. Still, Theo smiled. Not often. Not loudly. But on the rare mornings when the sun hit his window just right, he smiled at the golden light like he was greeting an old friend. Elliot lived for those moments. He had spent years trying to fix what was wrong, if wrong was even the right word. Specialists traveled from New York, Zurich, Singapore. Therapists filled their calendars. Medical machines hummed quietly in corners of their home. Money, after all, was something Elliot had in excess. But no amount of wealth could soften the way strangers hesitated before speaking to Theo, or the way children sometimes stared before turning away. It couldn't stop waiters from asking Elliot for his son's order instead of speaking to Theo directly. Money couldn't erase the loneliness that lived behind Theo's bright blue eyes, no matter how many toys, trips, or treatments Elliot paid for. It was a loneliness Theo never complained about. In fact, he rarely asked for anything. He didn't demand the latest gadgets. He didn't beg for outings or parties or sleepovers. He didn't ask why other boys ran freely across fields while he struggled to hold a pencil steady. Theo simply existed. Quiet. Observant. Gentle. Like a boy trying not to take up space in a world that constantly reminded him he didn't fit. Tonight was supposed to be different. The Royal Rose Foundation had invited Elliot as a VIP guest to their annual fundraiser, a glittering event attended by CEOs, politicians, and media elites. Elliot wasn't excited about going. He'd attended dozens of such galas, all with the same hollow smiles and pretentious speeches. But when he saw the invitation was for a charity supporting children with disabilities, he thought perhaps, just perhaps, Theo would enjoy a night outside the confines of routine. He imagined music lifting his son's spirits, fancy lights catching his attention, soft laughter humbling the room. Maybe even a moment where Theo forgot, just for a second, that he was different. But reality greeted them the second they entered the ballroom. Eyes paused mid-blink. Conversations dipped. People smiled politely before quickly looking away. A social chill settled over the space like frost. Theo sat quietly in his wheelchair, dressed in a navy blazer and light blue shirt. His hair was combed neatly, his tie slightly crooked from his trembling hands. He didn't say a word, but Elliot watched his fingers tighten around the wheelchair's armrests. He felt it too, the weight of being unwelcome. Elliot placed a hand on his son's shoulder and forced a smile neither of them truly felt. Tonight was supposed to be different. He didn't yet know how different it would be. Amani Price moved like a whisper through the ballroom, quiet, steady, almost invisible by design. Years in hospitality had taught her the art of blending into luxury spaces where people like her were seen only when needed and forgotten the moment they stepped away. But invisibility had its advantages. While others ignored what didn't concern them, Amani noticed everything. She noticed the way wealthy guests laughed a little too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. She noticed which couples spoke kindly and which ones snapped at staff like they were ordering around appliances. She noticed the subtle command of the elite, "We see only what we want to see." And tonight, she noticed something else entirely. Across the ballroom, beyond the clinking glasses and shallow small talk, sat a boy in a wheelchair. Thin arms. Controlled, careful movements. Eyes that followed the room like he was observing the world from behind glass. Theo. Amani had seen many children with disabilities. Her youngest brother, Darius, had been born with a motor delay that made walking difficult. She knew the difference between a child who was shy and a child who was tired of being stared at. Theo was the latter. But what struck her wasn't his disability, it was the way people behaved around him. Guests skirted the edges of his table like he was a piece of delicate furniture they weren't sure belonged. Some offered stiff smiles, their eyes flickering away too quickly. Others didn't look at him at all. And even though the night was young, Amani sensed a familiar sadness in the boy's posture, the kind that forms when the world repeatedly tells you, you're an inconvenience. Her tray of champagne flutes trembled slightly as she paused mid-step. There he was again, watching the dancers with an expression that squeezed her heart. His fingers twitched to the music, trying desperately to mimic what his body wouldn't allow. That longing. That unspoken wish. She had seen it in her brother's eyes when kids played football at school and he could only watch from the sidelines. Amani exhaled slowly. Someone needed to do something. But she knew how the hierarchy here worked. Servers were expected to smile, serve, and disappear. Never interrupt. Never cross boundaries. Never make the guests uncomfortable. Yet the biggest discomfort in the room wasn't Theo. It was everyone else's inability to treat him like he belonged. As Amani moved toward the next table, she caught the boy's father glancing nervously at him, checking if he was sad, bored, overwhelmed. The man looked polished, successful, important, yet somehow fragile around the edges, as though life had humbled him in places money couldn't reach. Elliot Raymond. She recognized him from magazines, charity boards, news interviews. But power meant nothing when you were holding a child who felt like an outsider in every room. Amani pressed her lips together and made a decision. Without waiting for permission, she set her tray on a nearby stand and walked toward Theo. Not too fast, she didn't want to startle him. Not too slow, she didn't want to give herself time to second-guess. As she approached, Elliot straightened in his chair, surprise flickering across his features. Servers rarely came near them unless called. But Amani didn't look at Elliot. She knelt beside Theo so their eyes met at the same level. "Hi," she said softly, her voice warm and steady. "I'm Amani. I couldn't help noticing, you like the music, don't you?" Theo blinked, caught off guard. His lips parted, and after a moment he whispered. "Why yes." Amani smiled. "It's my favorite too. You know. I've danced to this song 100 times. But never with someone as cool as you." Theo's eyes widened. A breathless laugh escaped him, a sound so light and pure Elliot felt his throat tighten. Amani leaned closer. "Would you like to dance? I know a way we can make it work." Elliot inhaled sharply. He wanted to say no, to warn her about Theo's spasms, his trembling hands, the risk of embarrassment. But Theo spoke before he could. "Yes," he whispered. "Please." And just like that, Amani's smile deepened. "Then let's make it a dance you'll never forget." She stood, gently placed her hands on the wheelchair handles, and turned toward the dance floor. The first steps toward a moment that would change all of their lives. The ballroom was a universe of glittering chandeliers, polished marble, and carefully curated elegance, but as Amani guided Theo's wheelchair toward the center, the universe seemed to shrink into a single stunned heartbeat. The music continued, soft jazz, warm and soothing, but the room no longer moved with it. Conversation stuttered, forks hovered mid-air, and a ripple of disbelief rolled across the guests like a wave. Elliot followed closely behind, unsure whether to be proud, terrified, or apologetic. He had never seen anyone walk Theo toward a dance floor, not a therapist, not a nurse, not even family. It wasn't done. It wasn't expected. It wasn't allowed. But Amani walked with purpose. A purpose that didn't ask permission. When they reached the edge of the floor, she turned to Theo, her voice barely above a whisper yet powerful enough to steady his trembling hands. "This is your moment," she said. "Just follow my lead. We'll go slow." Theo nodded, breath hitching in excitement. His whole life, he had watched others glide, spin, twirl, movement that looked like magic, movement his body refused to grant him. But now someone believed he could have a piece of that world. Amani stepped in front of him, gently taking his hands in hers. They were stiff and shaking, but she didn't flinch. She didn't correct him. She didn't treat him like he was fragile. She held him the way partners hold each other on a dance floor, with respect. The guests noticed. Oh, they noticed. A woman in a ruby gown gasped softly. A group of businessmen whispered among themselves. A teenage girl paused mid-selfie, lowering her phone in shock. But what struck Elliot most was the look on certain faces, those sharp, icy expressions of disapproval. Not just surprise. Not just confusion. But offense. To them, this wasn't a dance. It was a disruption. A violation of unspoken rules. Theo, too overwhelmed to notice the stares, watched Amani with pure joy radiating from his face. She began moving her feet. In slow, rhythmic steps, left, right, sway, pause, rocking gently like a tide pulling him into motion. Through her guidance, Theo's arms followed, jerky but earnest, his chair swaying slightly as he tried to mimic her. It wasn't graceful. But it was beautiful. For the first time in his life, Theo was dancing. Cameras began to rise from tables, first one, then three, then nearly a dozen phones pointing toward the pair. The room was turning into a silent theater, with Theo and Amani as the unexpected main act. A man near the bar shook his head. "This is inappropriate," he muttered loudly enough for others to hear. "Someone needs to stop that," a woman added. Elliot felt heat rise in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was anger or shame, shame that he'd been part of this world for so long without realizing how cruel it could be. Still, Amani stayed focused. The room was noise. Theo was the melody. "You're doing great," she whispered to him. "Look at you, you're dancing." Theo laughed. A breathless, uneven little laugh that made Elliot's eyes sting. He hadn't heard Theo laugh like that in years. But the moment, the fragile, perfect moment, was about to be shattered. From the far end of the ballroom, Gerald Lockridge, the hotel manager, cut through the crowd like a blade through silk. His polished shoes clicked sharply on the floor, his jaw clenched, his expression thunderous. Elliot's stomach dropped. Gerald was the kind of man who worshipped rules more than people. He marched toward them, his voice already sharp and rising. Amani Price. She froze, but only for a second. Theo's hands tightened in hers. Elliot stepped forward instinctively. And the ballroom held its breath. The dance wasn't over, but the fight for it had only just begun. Gerald Lockridge didn't walk, he carved a path through the ballroom with the precision of a man who believed he owned every square inch beneath his polished shoes. His graying hair was slicked back to perfection, his black suit immaculate, his expression the practiced blend of authority and annoyance reserved for staff problems. And to Gerald, this was a problem. A serious one. He arrived at the edge of the dance floor just as Amani guided Theo through another gentle sway. Theo's body jerked slightly with the movement, but he was laughing, a bubbling, uncontrolled joy that glittered brighter than the chandelier above him. Gerald didn't see joy. He saw disruption. "Miss Price," he snapped, his voice slicing through the music. Amani lifted her head but didn't let go of Theo's hands. Gerald's nostrils flared. "Step away from the guest. Now." The band hesitated, their melody stumbling into a confused drift of notes. Conversations around the room died instantly. Phones rose higher, dozens now, angled like watchful eyes. Theo's smile dimmed. His trembling hands tightened around Amani's fingers. Elliot stepped forward, every instinct screaming at him to intervene, but something in Amani's eyes, calm, steady, unafraid, held him in place. "I'm in the middle of a dance, sir," she said gently. "If you don't mind waiting." "I do mind," Gerald barked. "This is not part of your duties. The guests are uncomfortable." A ripple spread through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, some nodding in agreement, others hiding behind their wine glasses to avoid involvement. Uncomfortable. That word hung in the air like a foul odor. Amani inhaled softly. When she spoke, her voice was low but firm. "Sir, he's not hurting anyone." Gerald scoffed. "This is a high-profile event, not a charity playroom. Your job is to serve refreshments, not." He gestured vaguely toward Theo, as if the boy's existence was an inconvenience he couldn't articulate. Amani's jaw tightened. She didn't move. Didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned slightly closer to Theo, keeping herself between the boy and Gerald's looming presence. "I will finish this dance," she said calmly, "and then I'll return to my duties." Theo's breathing grew uneven. His legs stiffened involuntarily, a sign of rising panic. Elliot moved closer, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. Gerald noticed, and misinterpreted the gesture. "Mr. Raymond," he said, switching to a syrupy, performative politeness. "You understand this cannot continue. Surely you see how inappropriate this is." Elliot felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Inappropriate? His son's happiness was inappropriate. Theo looked up at his father, confusion clouding his eyes. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" That single sentence cracked something inside Elliot. Before he could answer, Amani squeezed Theo's hand softly. "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." Gerald huffed. "This is ridiculous. Miss Price, step away at once." And then he did it. He reached forward and grabbed her wrist. Not violently. Not dramatically. but with a controlling, authoritative grip that said, "You are beneath me. Obey." A gasp echoed across the ballroom. Theo jerked in distress. Amani stiffened. Elliot saw red. Without thinking, he lunged forward, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as he pushed past a stunned couple. He planted himself between Gerald and Amani, his voice shaking with fury. "Take your hand off her." The room froze. Gerald blinked, startled by Elliot's sudden proximity. "Mr. Raymond, I said," Elliot growled, each word sharp as broken glass, "take your hand off her." Gerald released her instantly, stepping back in shock. Theo watched with wide eyes. Amani steadied him, though her own hands trembled now. Elliot straightened, chest pounding, eyes locked on the manager who had dared humiliate the only person who treated his son like a human being. "You have no idea," Elliot said quietly, "how badly you've misjudged this moment." Phones kept recording. Every face in the ballroom was turned toward them. A storm had begun, one no one could stop now. Elliot Raymond had spoken in boardrooms filled with titans of industry. He had negotiated hostile takeovers, delivered keynote speeches to thousands, and held his composure through crises that would crumble ordinary men. But tonight, right here, under glittering chandeliers and judgmental eyes, his voice shook with something far more real than corporate authority. Rage. Grief. And a truth that had waited years to be spoken. Gerald Lockridge stood stiffly, trying to regain control of the situation, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve as if Elliot's defiance had physically stained him. "Mr. Raymond," he said with brittle calm, "you're emotional. I understand. But this spectacle, is undermining the dignity of our event." The word struck Elliot like a punch. Dignity. He looked around at the guests, their raised eyebrows, their stiff posture, their fear of discomfort masquerading as sophistication. Then he turned back to Gerald, his voice low, controlled, deadly calm. "You have absolutely no idea what dignity means." Gasps fluttered through the room. Theo, still clutching Amani's hands, blinked up at his father with wide, uncertain eyes. Elliot knelt beside him, placing one hand gently on his son's knee. "This boy," Elliot said, voice thick, "has fought for dignity every single day of his life. With every button he tries to fasten. With every spoon he tries to lift. With every step he's never been able to take. And tonight, for the first time, someone treated him like he belonged." Theo looked down, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Amani squeezed his hands softly. Elliot stood again, eyes blazing. "And you called it inappropriate?" Gerald swallowed hard. "Mr. Raymond, No," Elliot snapped. "Enough. You don't get to hide behind etiquette or policy. What you did was cruel. What she did," he nodded at Amani, "was human." A wave of murmurs swept the ballroom. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had been complicit in silent judgment. Others wore tight, defensive expressions, unable to admit their discomfort had been the problem. Elliot continued, voice gaining strength. "You know what's truly inappropriate? The way people stare at my son as if he's a burden. The way they pretend not to see him because they don't know what to say. The way they avoid him because interacting with someone different makes them uncomfortable." His gaze swept across every face in the room. "You think your money, your titles, your refined manners make you better? They don't. Not one of you showed him the simple kindness that Amani did." A man in a tux cleared his throat, muttering, this isn't necessary." Elliot rounded on him. "Isn't it? Because it sure as hell wasn't necessary for my son to sit alone at a table all night while you all pretended he wasn't here." Silence clamped down so tightly it felt suffocating. Then Elliot spoke the words that truly gutted the room. "I've fought for my son's dignity for 14 years, but tonight, for the first time, I realized that while I've been fighting for him, I've been blind to the dignity taken from others every day, people like Amani, who don't get the privilege of being seen." Amani blinked, tears forming, though she fought them back with quiet strength. Gerald shifted, panic creeping into his posture. "Mr. Raymond, we can resolve this discreetly. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." "No," Elliot said. "We will continue it right here, where the judgment began." Phones recorded every second. Theo tugged gently on Amani's sleeve. "Can we finish the dance?" he whispered, voice small. Amani smiled at him, soft, reassuring. "If your dad says it's okay." Elliot inhaled, steadying himself. "It's more than okay," he said, voice softening. "It's what should have happened all along." He turned to the musicians. "Would you play something for my son?" The pianist, her eyes shining, nodded. "Of course." A gentle melody rose, a slow, hopeful tune. Amani positioned herself in front of Theo again. And as she guided him back into their dance, the ballroom watched something they had never expected. A moment of pure humanity breaking through walls of privilege, tradition, and prejudice. Elliot watched them with a heart overflowing and breaking at the same time. The dance wasn't just a dance anymore. It was a revolution. By the next morning, every newsfeed, timeline, and social platform was ablaze with the same headline. Billionaire father defends disabled son after racist manager tries to stop his dance. It spread like wildfire. Clips of the confrontation, different angles, different captions, circulated faster than anyone could control. One showed Amani helping Theo sway to the music, her hands steadying his trembling ones. Another showed Gerald grabbing her wrist. Another captured Elliot's furious, "Take your hand off her." Some videos had dramatic music added. Others had commentary. But all of them had the same impact. The world was watching. Elliot woke up to 187 missed calls. Messages from friends, colleagues, reporters. His PR team was in full crisis mode, though he wasn't in the mood to soothe egos or craft statements. He only cared about one thing, Theo. He walked into his son's room and found him awake, staring at the ceiling with a dreamy smile. "Dad?" Theo whispered. "Yes, buddy." "Was I really dancing last night?" Elliot sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a hand through his son's hair. "You weren't just dancing," he said softly. "You shined." Theo's eyes glowed. "Will I ever get to dance again?" Elliot swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. "I promise you will." Downstairs, Elliot finally checked the news coverage. Some commenters praised him. Finally, a rich man using his voice for something good. What that waitress did was heroic. This boy deserves the world. Others were uglier. That waitress was unprofessional. Why was a disabled kid on the dance floor? Publicity stunt. Elliot closed the app before anger consumed him again. But one comment haunted him more than any insult. Imagine how many times this happened to black women when no billionaire was watching. He read it 3 times. For the first time in his insulated life, Elliot felt the weight of a reality he had never considered. A A world where Amani lived every day. Where people judged without ever understanding. At noon, an unknown number flashed across his phone. He answered immediately. "Mr. Raymond?" Her voice was polite. Controlled. It was Amani. He straightened. "Amani. Are you okay? Did the hotel fire you?" A short pause. "No, sir. Surprisingly, they didn't." Another pause. This time heavier. "They offered me a promotion." Elliot blinked. "A promotion?" "Yes. Event coordinator. Suddenly they're calling what I did initiative, compassion, and excellent guest experience." Her voice carried a sad irony. "Amazing what a viral video can do." Elliot exhaled. "You deserve better than reactive apologies. Better than damage control." She hesitated before speaking again. "Actually, that's why I called. I want to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Several disability organizations reached out to me today. They saw the video. They want to host a citywide inclusive dance event for children like Theo." Her voice grew brighter. "A real event. No judgment. No stares. Just music and joy." Elliot felt something warm and fragile unfold in his chest. "And they want me to coordinate it," Amani added. "But I didn't want to say yes unless Theo could be part of it. Unless you wanted to be involved too." Elliot stood up from his chair, pacing the room with energy he hadn't felt in years. "You have me," he said immediately. "Whatever you need, venue, funding, planning, I'm in. Completely." Amani let out a quiet breath, one that sounded like relief. "Thank you. Truly." Before hanging up, she added softly. "You know, that boy changed me, too. The way he lit up, it reminded me why I've always believed kindness is stronger than fear." Elliot's voice softened. "He feels the same about you." When the call ended, Elliot sat down, mind racing. He had spent his life building a world of privilege, but last night had shown him how small that world truly was. How blind he had been to barriers that didn't affect him personally. He looked upstairs toward Theo's room. This time, Elliot wasn't going to fix only the problems he understood. He was going to fight the ones he never saw coming. The world was watching now. And Elliot Raymond wasn't going to stay silent ever again. The community centre in South London was nothing like the Grand Riverside Hotel. Its floors were scuffed, its chairs mismatched, and the lighting flickered slightly as if deciding whether it wanted to cooperate. But to Elliot, Theo, and the dozens of families arriving that evening, it was perfect. Outside, volunteers hung banners painted by children. Everyone deserves to dance. Joy has no limits. Inside, the room pulsed with anticipation. Wheelchairs rolled across the floor in all colors, electric blue, bright red, neon green. Walkers clinked softly against tiles. Parents adjusted braces, fixed ties, checked hair bows, and wiped happy tears they pretended were just dust in their eyes. This wasn't a gala. It was a celebration. Amani stood at the center, clipboard in hand, wearing a soft lavender blouse that made her look like a gentle burst of dawn. Her hair was braided up neatly, but wisps escaped in soft curls around her face, evidence of the hectic morning she'd spent setting everything up. When she spotted Theo rolling in beside Elliot, her entire face lit up. "You made it," she exclaimed, walking toward them with genuine excitement. Theo grinned, a full, unfiltered grin. "I wouldn't miss it. Elliot watched his son's confidence with a feeling he could barely put into words. For so long, Theo's world had been confined to therapy sessions, medical appointments, and controlled environments. Tonight, he was just a teenager at a dance. Amani crouched beside him, just like the first night. "We've got a special spot for you," she whispered. "Front and center, so the music reaches you first." Theo blushed, his hands fluttering with small, anxious excitement. Elliot felt his throat tighten. Then the lights dimmed, and soft string lights overhead flickered to life. The DJ tapped the microphone. "Welcome, everyone. Tonight isn't about perfection. It isn't about steps. It's about joy." Cheers echoed across the room. Parents clapped. Kids squealed. A few teenagers gave smiles, overwhelmed but excited. The first song played, a vibrant, upbeat number, and the room exploded into motion. A girl with braces on her legs spun slowly with the help of her father. A boy in a purple wheelchair flicked his joystick wildly, spinning in small circles and laughing hysterically. Two autistic teens swayed together near the corner, humming to the beat. The energy was contagious. Elliot stood off to the side, absorbing it, his eyes drifting again and again to Theo. His son's head bobbed in rhythm, his hands tapped his armrests, his chair vibrated with tiny bursts of movement. He wasn't watching others dance. He was participating. Amani approached Theo with a gentle smile. "Ready for round 2, partner?" Theo nodded eagerly. "Yes." Elliot watched as Amani positioned herself in front of him, taking his trembling hands with the same respect she had at the gala. She began to sway, slow, rhythmic, patient, and Theo followed, his jerky movements blending into something that resembled freedom. Parents around the room paused to watch. Not in pity. Not with judgment. But with admiration. Elliot felt tears sting his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. Then something unexpected happened. The crowd formed a circle around Theo and Amani. Not to isolate them, no. To celebrate them. Kids cheered. Parents clapped. A boy in a bright yellow wheelchair shouted, "Go, Theo!" Theo flushed with joy so pure it lit his entire face. And Elliot, he broke. Not in sadness. In relief. In all the years of caring for Theo, of worrying, protecting, apologizing for spaces that weren't made for him, Elliot had never imagined a moment where his son would become the center of applause. Not for sympathy. But for being himself. Amani leaned close to Theo. "You're a star," she whispered. Theo beamed. Elliot stepped forward, placing a hand on Amani's shoulder. "Thank you," he murmured, emotion thick in his voice. She shook her head softly. "No, Mr. Raymond. Thank you, for letting the world see what kindness can do." And for the rest of the night, the music played. The wheelchairs spun. The children laughed. No barriers. No stairs. No limits. Just joy. Joy that belonged to them. Joy they had earned. Joy the world could no longer deny. When the final song faded and the last child rolled off the dance floor, the community center glowed with the lingering warmth of a night that would never be forgotten. The air was thick with laughter, the scent of fruit punch, and the sound of parents thanking volunteers with shaky, emotional voices. Elliot stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching Theo talk to another boy about the songs they liked. It was the longest conversation Elliot had ever seen Theo have with someone close to his age. Not once did the other boy flinch at his slurred words. Not once did he look away. Not once did he treat Theo like he was anything less. The simplicity of it nearly brought Elliot to his knees. Amani approached with a tired smile, her makeup slightly smudged, curls escaping their braid, and the faint glow of someone who had given everything she had, and then some. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" Elliot exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on Theo. "I don't think I've been okay like this in years." Amani followed his gaze and smiled. "He's different tonight. He's free," Elliot whispered. "Maybe for the first time." Silence settled between them, not awkward, but reflective. The kind of silence that acknowledges something sacred has taken place. Amani broke it gently. "You know what's funny? People tell me all the time that kindness is easy." She let out a tiny laugh. "They've obviously never tried practicing it when the world tells you you're the one who doesn't belong." Elliot looked at her, really looked at her. "I was one of those people," he admitted. "I told myself I wasn't cruel, so I must be good. I thought staying neutral made me decent." He swallowed hard. "But last night I realized neutrality just props up cruelty." Amani's eyes softened. "The important thing is you didn't stay silent. Not when it mattered." "It shouldn't have taken that long," Elliot said quietly. "I should have seen it sooner." "That's the thing about seeing," Amani replied. "You can't force it. But once you do, you're responsible for what you do next." Elliot nodded slowly, committing those words to something deeper than memory, something closer to purpose. Just then, Theo rolled up to them, cheeks flushed, hair tousled, joy radiating off him like sunlight. "Dad," he said breathlessly, "this was the best night of my life." Elliot crouched beside him, placing his hands gently on the wheelchair handles. "You deserve 100 more nights like this," he said. "And I'm going to make sure you get them." Theo grinned so wide his whole face crinkled. "And Amani," she said, "I dance like I'm flying." Amani chuckled. "You did. I just helped you lift off." Theo's eyes sparkled, bright, fearless, alive. Elliot felt something shift inside him. A truth he'd spent years resisting now rooted itself firmly in his chest. His son didn't need to be fixed. The world needed to be changed. And Elliot Raymond, man of influence, of resources, of power, finally knew where to start. He stood and turned to Amani. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm restructuring my entire company. New hiring practices. New inclusion policies. Scholarships. Job pipelines. Training programs." Amani's eyebrows lifted. "That's huge." "It's overdue," Elliot replied. "If I can build skyscrapers, I can build equity." She smiled, a soft, proud smile that seemed to say this is what happens when someone finally wakes up. Elliot continued, "And I want you to lead an advisory board. Paid. Official. Permanent." Amani blinked. "Me?" "You," he said firmly. "The world needs more eyes like yours." Theo's chair whirred as he turned toward her. "Amani, will you still dance with me? Even when you're important?" She knelt to his level, smiling warmly. "Theo, I will dance with you anytime you want. Important or not." Theo giggled. And in that moment, surrounded by flickering lights and fading music, Elliot realized something profound. Greatness wasn't found in wealth, status, or polished floors. It was found in everyday courage. In the hands that held his son. In the voice that refused to stay silent. In the kindness that sparked a revolution one dance at a time. The world would not change all at once. But it would change. Because now, Elliot finally understood the truth. Being a good person is not about avoiding harm. It's about choosing to do good, imperfectly, courageously, consistently. As the last families left and the hall emptied, Amani, Theo, and Elliot walked together toward the exit, one step, one will turn, one heartbeat at a time. The music had stopped. But the movement had just begun.